All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for Torah time. We have a bunch of chitlins with us today. Hey, don't be tickling each other. Bunch of crazy munchkins. Today, folks, is the day of Shavuot.
What's that?
I'm glad you asked. Shavuot is the day that, remember when the children of Israel went to Mount Sinai and God spoke from the mountain and gave them the 10 Commandments? Does anybody remember that?
Yes.
Okay, so they went to the mountain, and 3 days before God appeared on top of the mountain, he told them, I want you to clean your clothes, take a bath, and get ready, because on the third day, I'm going to come down on the mountain and speak with you. And all of the people, there was like a couple of million people surrounding this mountain. And on that morning, they had all washed and taken baths and gotten ready. And when they woke up in the morning, they woke up because they heard a trumpet sounding. And it was really loud. And not only was it really loud, it kept getting louder and louder and louder. And the ground began to shake, and the whole top of this mountain was like on fire. And it was smoking, and there was lightning and thunder, and the people were really scared. It was kind of freaky. I'm sure if you woke up in the morning because you heard a really loud trumpet sound and you went outside and you looked, and those mountains over there were like on fire, and there was huge clouds covering it and thunderbolts and lightning, and this leader of yours said, all right, everybody, let's go. We're going towards the mountain. That'd probably be the last thing you would want to do. Because I'm getting out of here. This looks seriously dangerous. But that's not what they did. They actually went closer to the mountain. And they got to the bottom of the mountain, and then God began to speak. The voice of God came out of this huge flaming furnace and fire and smoke and clouds and lightning, and spoke the 10 Commandments. And it really frightened the people. And they said, when it was all done, that they were terribly frightened, and they didn't like that very much at all. And they told Moses, I don't think you should have God talk to us anymore like that, because our clean clothes are all now soiled. We have gone to the bathroom in our pants, and we are very afraid. So do not let God speak to us in that way anymore, because we will die. And so God said, they have asked a good thing. He says, I won't speak to them like that anymore. But whenever I will send someone to speak to them the words that I want them to hear. And so Moses was one of those people who heard the words of God and told them to us. Because those 10 Commandments, that wasn't the whole story. That was just the beginning. God was going to continue speaking and tell us all of the things that he wanted us to do and how he wanted us to live our lives. But we said, please stop. Moses, you go up and talk to God and then come back and tell us what he said, because we don't want to hear his voice anymore. It's too scary. Because the Torah teaches us, and the writings of King David teaches us, that when God spoke, it caused trees to shatter and rocks to shatter, and animals that were pregnant immediately gave birth. Women who were pregnant gave birth. It caused some serious havoc. And they also said that you could actually see the words of God. Can you guys see my words right now? No, it's because I'm not God. But they actually said that you could see the words of God. It was pretty weird and pretty frightening. And so God said, yeah, I'll just speak with my representative, and then he can tell you the rest. So he told Moses the rest of the commandments, and Moses came back down the mountain and told us what God had said. And that's how we got the commandments. But the first 10 we got from God's mouth himself. And now it is on this very day. We would have woken up this morning to the sound of a huge trumpet blasting from a mountain nearby. So on this very day, every year, our people remember that this is the day that God spoke from the mountain. And it was a very crazy time, and we remember it every year now. And so, for thousands of years, we remember and we talk to our children about the day that God spoke from the mountain. And we also read this short story about Ruth, who is the grandmother of King David, the great king of Israel. And I'm going to read this story to you now. Are you ready? It's short, so all you got to do is kick back for a few minutes. And it happened in the days when there were judges judging the people of Israel, that there was a famine in the land. You know what a famine is, Evan? Tell me what it is.
Something really bad where everything goes bad. No water.
No water.
Yeah.
The plants don't grow. What's that?
The devil.
It could be. Could be. So there was a famine in this land, and so a certain man who was a Bethlehemite, he lived in the city of Bethlehem, and he went to live in another country called Moab, because there was no food there, no water, no plants growing, and they couldn't get any food. So he went to the land of Moab with his wife and his 2 sons. And his 2 sons, he was named Elimelech, and he had 2 sons. His wife was named Naomi, and his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah. And they came into the fields of Moab, and they stayed there in this foreign country called Moab. Now, Naomi's husband, Elimelech, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. And they got wives for themselves and got married, but didn't have any children. And so, then, unfortunately, the boys died. Her sons died. And all it was the wife, Naomi, and the wives of her 2 sons. Now, the name of the one was Orpah, and the second one was named Ruth. And this book is named after Ruth. And they lived there in the land of Moab for about 10 years. And these boys of hers, Mahlon and Chilion, died, and the woman was bereaved of her 2 children and her husband. And she rose up, she and her daughters-in-law, and turned back from the fields of Moab, because she had heard in the fields of Moab where they were staying that Jehovah, our God, had visited his people back where she came from and had brought them food and rain, and things were going well there. So she thought, I'm going back. And she went out from the place where she had been with her 2 daughters-in-law with her, and they went in the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, Go, each of you, back to her house, to her mother and father. And may my God, Jehovah, deal kindly with you, as you have been kind to me and my husband and my sons who have died. Now may Jehovah grant you that you may find, each of you, peace in the house of your parents and in the houses that you shared with my sons. And she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and cried. And they said to her, Well, for sure, we're going to go back with you to where you're going, to your people. And Naomi said, No, turn back and go back to your family. Why would you go with me? I don't have any children that you can marry them. And are you just going to wait for me to have more children? You'll be old ladies. Even if I was to get pregnant tonight, you're going to wait around for me to have new boys for you to marry? I'm too old. And so they cried, and she said, No, it is more bitter for me that you should come with me. You guys stay here. And they lifted up their voices and cried again. Now Orpah, the one girl, kissed her mother-in-law, Naomi, and said, Okay, I'm going back to my family. But Ruth, the other girl, would not leave. And she said, See, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Go with her. But Ruth said, Please do not beg me to return and leave you, or turn back from following you. For where you go, I will go too. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people in the land of Judah will be my people. And your God, Jehovah, will be my God. And wherever you die, I will die. And there I'll be buried. May Jehovah kill me, and even more, if I do anything but what I have just said. And she saw that she had made herself strong to go with her, and she stopped bothering her and said, All right, let's go. And they both went, both of them, back into the city of Bethlehem in the land of Judah. And as it happened as they came into Bethlehem, that all of the city was reminded about this woman who had lived there 10 years before, and they all remembered her and said, look, it's Naomi. They said, man, isn't this Naomi from a long time ago? And she said, don't call me Naomi. I'm changing my name to Merah, because Merah means bitterness, because she's sad. She lost her husband and her 2 sons. So she said, don't call me Naomi anymore. Call me Merah, because the Almighty God has dealt pretty bitterly with me. I went out full with my whole family, and Yehovah has brought me back to this land empty. So don't call me Naomi, since Yehovah has had his eye set against me, and the Almighty has allowed evil to come upon me. And Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, along with her, who returned from the fields of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So this is the beginning of the barley harvest, which is when one of the feasts is. Does anyone know when the feast is that is during the barley harvest?
Sunday?
Close.
Saturday.
No, it's one of the feast days.
Monday?
No, it's one of the feast days. It's actually Passover.
Oh.
Passover happens when the barley crop is ripe. And so Naomi had a kinsman. Does anyone know what a kinsman is? Hey, would you please remove yourself from that boy? Thank you. Naomi had a kinsman, like a cousin. We got some cousins here, don't we? So Naomi had a cousin of her husband, a very mighty man of the family of Elimelech, her husband, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth of Moab said to Naomi, her mother-in-law, let me go to the field and glean or pick up what is left after the laborers are working in the fields, and I will find whoever will allow me to glean in their fields. Now, you may not remember this, but in one of our Torah portions, it talks about if you're a farmer and you have a field and you are reaping the harvest of your field, there's a couple of restrictions that you have to do if you are a farmer. Hayden, do you remember what they are?
Leave some on the edges.
Leave some on the edges. Evan, what's the other? What is the edges being left for?
Poor people and animals.
Poor people and animals, that is correct. And strangers and sojourners and aliens who are living among us. And so it's interesting here that Naomi and Ruth, especially Ruth, knew that she was allowed to do that. And so she went and said, I'm going to go find a field where I can do some gleaning around the edges. And so she went, and as her chance happened to be on the portion of the field belonging to Boaz, who was Elimelech, her father-in-law's family, behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said to the people who were reaping his field, Yehovah be with you. And they answered him and said, may Yehovah bless you. And Boaz said to his young man who had been set over the reapers, he was like the boss in charge, he says, who is that young woman over there gleaning in our field? And the young man who had been set over the reapers answered and said, she is a young woman from Moab who came with one of your relatives, Naomi, from the fields of Moab. And she said, please let me glean here. And so we've allowed her to glean. And she came and has remained here since early morning until evening. And she sat. Oh, I'm missing some text here. Sorry. And Boaz went to Ruth and said to her, do not fear, my daughter. Don't go into any other field, and also do not pass through any other way. You shall stay close to my young women, and your eyes shall be on my field where they are reaping, and you will go after them. Have I not? I have commanded my young men to make sure they don't touch you, and allow you to glean whatever you want from my fields. And he began to be very, very nice to her. In fact, he actually said, you can have water that I'm giving to my servants, and when they have lunch, you can go and eat lunch with them. And he even told the people who were gathering his fields, he said, I want you to take some out of what you've gathered and kind of just throw it on the ground there and let her pick it up. So they were being very, very kind to her. And she discovered this. Is someone sneezing like crazy in there? Who is that?
Yeah.
Huh?
I think it's Eric.
Oh, is he having a sneezing attack? And Ruth felt really blessed by this, and she fell on her face and said, and bowed down to the earth and said to him, "Why have I found grace in your eyes that you should notice me? I'm a foreigner." And Boaz answered her and said to her, "It has been fully told to me all that you have done with your mother-in-law after the death of your husband. And you left your father and your mother and the land of your birth and came to a people which you had not even known before. And Jehovah shall repay your good work, and your reward shall be complete from Jehovah, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." And she said, "Let me find grace in your eyes, my Lord, because you have comforted me, and because you have spoken to me kindly. And I surely am not as one of your handmaids." And Boaz said to her, "At mealtime you shall come, and you shall eat the bread and dip your morsel in the wine." And she sat at the side of the reapers, and he reached out roasted grain and gave it to her. And she ate and was full, and she even had some left over. And she rose up to go collecting grain again. And Boaz commanded his young man who was in charge, saying, "I want you to even give her stuff that has been collected already." And so she gathered in the fields until evening and beat out what she had found. She separated the grain from the remaining chaff, and she beat it out and found that she had quite a bit. It says here a measurement that you probably wouldn't understand, but she had quite a bit. Yeah.
At our church today, we had bread and we dipped it in wine.
Did you really?
Yes.
Awesome. That's cool. Something just like this. She had about an ephah of barley, and she took it and went to the city, and her... That's why I didn't want to tell you, because I don't know. it's a bit. It's a good amount, but I'm not sure what an ephah is. And so she went back home to her mother-in-law, and she brought it in. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where have you gleaned today, and where have you worked? And whoever noticed you, may he be blessed." And so she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The name of the man with whom I have worked today is Boaz." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "Blessed is he of Jehovah, who has not forsaken his kindness with the living and with the dead." And so she told Naomi, "That's actually our relative that you went to work for." And Naomi said to her, "The man is near in kinship to us, and he is one of our redeemers." Now I'll explain that to you in just a second. And Ruth the Moabite said, "And he surely said to me, you shall stay close, near to the young men whom I have here, until they have completed the whole harvest which I have." And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law Ruth, "Good, my daughter, that you go out with his young woman, and that men may not attack you in another field." And she stayed close to the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and the wheat harvest. So she stayed there from springtime all the way through the summer, when the barley had already been harvested, and then they began to harvest the wheat. She stayed there the whole summer collecting, and they lived off of that food. And now her mother-in-law Naomi said to her, "My daughter, do I not seek rest with you? And now is it not Boaz of our kindred with whose young women you have been gleaning? Behold, he is winnowing the threshing floor of barley again tonight." So this looks like a whole nother year has passed, and the barley harvest has come around again. And she's saying, "Okay, my daughter, I have a plan for you this time. I want you to go where they're threshing out the barley and separating the heads of grain from the remaining leaves. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to bathe and anoint yourself with fragrant oils, bless you, and put your garments on you, and go down to the threshing floor where they are doing this work. Now do not let yourself be known to the man Boaz until he has finished eating and drinking. And it shall be, when he lies down, you shall take note of the place where he lies down, and you shall go and uncover his feet and lie down at his feet, and he will tell you what you are supposed to do." And she said to her, "Everything that you do, I will do. Everything that you said to me, I will do it." And so she went down to the threshing floor and did exactly what her mother-in-law had commanded her to do. Now Boaz ate and drank wine, and his heart felt good. That means he drank a little bit, maybe just the right amount of wine to where he was happy. And he went to sleep. And Naomi secretly got close to him and uncovered his feet and laid down at his feet. And it happened in the middle of the night that the man got cold because his feet had been uncovered, and he turned himself around and kind of woke up, and behold, there was a woman lying at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" And she said to him, "I am your handmaid Ruth, and you shall spread your skirt over your handmaid, for you are a kinsman redeemer." And he said, "Blessed be you of Jehovah, my daughter. You have dealt more kindly later on than you did even at the beginning, not to go after other young men, neither rich or poor. And now, my daughter, do not fear. All that you say I will do for you. To the gate of my people will know that you are an able woman. You are a good woman. And now, surely it is true that I am a kinsman redeemer, but there is also a redeemer who is closer than I. So stay tonight, and it shall be in the morning, if he will redeem you, that is good. He will redeem. And if he does not delight to redeem you, as Jehovah lives, then I will redeem you. Lie down here and let's go to sleep until the morning time." Now I want to explain something briefly to you about the kinsman redeemer. This woman had a field in the land of Israel with her son and her husband's property. But remember, there was no rain and no crops would grow, so they just left it. Now, she has this piece of property to sell, but there is a right in Israel that you don't sell your things to a stranger. You always go to your family first and say, "Would you buy this from me so that I can maybe get it back at a later time when I have more money?" And if your redeemer, your kinsman, one of your relatives will not buy it from you, then you would have to sell it to somebody outside of the family. But it is the custom to sell it to...
someone you know.
You could also sell it to someone you know if they were a good friend and would let you buy it back later when you got more money. If not, you'd have to sell it to a stranger, and they're not likely to give it back to you unless the year of Jubilee comes, and we've talked about that another time. But this guy Boaz was one of the redeemers, one of the family members that you would sell it to. But he said, "There's somebody closer to you than me. Their right is before me." And so he goes to the city gates, and he sat there, and behold, that kinsman redeemer that Boaz had been speaking about was passing by. And he said, "Turn aside, sit down here by me." And he turned aside and sat down, and he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here also." And they sat down, and he said to them, to the kinsman redeemer of Naomi, "Naomi, who is returned from the fields of Moab, will sell a portion of the field which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I said I would uncover your ears, saying, buy it before those sitting and before the elders of my people. If you will buy it, then buy it. But if you will not buy it, tell me, because I will buy it, because there is no one besides us to buy it." And he said, "I'll buy it." And Boaz said, "In the day that you buy the fields from Naomi, then you also are buying Ruth." Because remember, the other law in Israel is that if you have a son and he gets married and doesn't have any children and dies, then the other son has to marry that woman and make babies with her so that the name of that brother will not die out. So he says, if you buy the field, you're getting the young woman too into the deal, and you have to marry her. Now this guy who was first in line said, I do want to purchase the field, but I can't marry that woman because I'm already set up to do this. I got my own thing going on, so I can't buy it. But you can go ahead and buy it then. And so this is the way it was done in Israel, in the way of exchanging and redemption for confirming everything. They had 10 people sit around and they would talk about it, and there were witnesses. And a man would draw off his sandal and give it to the person that he was making the agreement with. And so the near kinsman said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself." And he drew off his sandal and gave it to him. And Boaz said to all the elders who were listening,
Is he gonna give it back?
"Yeah, you are witnesses today that I have bought all that belonged to Elimelech and all that was the belongings of his sons Chilion and Malon." Excuse me? Sorry? Well, you just take off your shoe and hand it to the person that you're agreeing with. It's like, an agreement. It's kind of like spitting in your hand and shaking hands. You ever seen somebody do that?
Yeah. I've seen someone have money.
Yeah. So this is another way of doing it. And so he actually went ahead and bought it. from Naomi, and also he got Ruth with the bargain, the wife of the dead son of Naomi, Mahlon. For I have bought myself a wife to raise up the name of the dead over his inheritance. And the name of the dead shall not be cut off from among his brothers. And from the gate of this place you are all witnesses today. And all the people who were in the gate and the elders said, We are witnesses. May Yehovah make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel. And may you do worthily in Ephratah, and proclaim the name in Bethlehem. And let your house be as the house of Judah's son Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, of the seed which Yehovah shall give to you of this young woman. And Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went in to her, and Yehovah had given her conception, and she bore a son. And the woman said to Naomi, and the women around said to Naomi, Blessed be Yehovah your God, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name may be called in Israel, and he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher in your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you has borne him to you. And Naomi took the child and laid him in her bosom and held on to him close and became a nurse to him. And the neighboring women gave him a name, saying, This is a son born of Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of the king David. And these are the generations of Perez, the son of Judah. Pharez fathered Hezron, and Hezron had a son named Ram, and Ram had a son named Amminadab, and Amminadab had a son named Mashon, and Mashon had a son named Salmon, and Salmon had a son named Boaz, and Boaz had a son named Obed, and Obed had a son named Jesse, and Jesse had a son named David, who became the king of Israel. So King David's grandmother, or great-grandmother as the case may be, was actually a foreigner from the land of Moab. Now there are a bunch of deep meanings to this text, but I won't go into that today. I see that I'm losing your attention, but you have all been a fabulous audience. Thank you so much for listening. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and grant you peace. May the Lord lift up his countenance and grant you grace. Amen. Thank you, kids.
Dun 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 dun.